The night it all went down, the country didn't explode. It flickered like reality itself hit pause. County maps flipped in impossible patterns. News anchors froze mid-sentence, and social media feeds spiraled out of control. For hours, it felt less like election night, and more like the floor was quietly tilting beneath the most powerful democracy on Earth. People remember the winner. Almost nobody remembers the strange, unsettling moments that had even seasoned political vets whispering, "Wait, what just happened?" This wasn't just a close race. Ballots poured in under conditions no one had ever seen. Rules changed on the fly. Courts lit up before some states even finished counting. Viral videos, late-night tweets, and breaking headlines turned small glitches into national freakouts. And somewhere in the chaos, the invisible glue holding the system together, the public's trust, started cracking. Here's the real question. When does a normal election go full-on strange? When do rules, technology, and uncertainty collide to make millions of Americans question reality itself? This story isn't just about two candidates. It's about the system, about power, and about a nation watching itself wobble in ways nobody saw coming. The stage was set, the tension was thick, and the strangest election in U.S. history, it was just getting started. The tension started months before a single ballot was cast. Early signs were subtle, almost invisible, but they mattered. A global virus had reshaped daily life. Schools closed, businesses stalled, and millions of Americans were suddenly asked to vote without ever stepping foot in a polling place. Mail-in ballots surged. Deadlines shifted. Drop boxes popped up in parking lots and community centers almost overnight. On the surface, it seemed practical, safe, necessary. But underneath, trust, the quiet backbone of democracy, was starting to crack. As the weeks rolled on, small contradictions began to surface. Some Americans saw expanded access as progress. Others saw vulnerability and risk. Signature verification became a hot topic, while some state systems were stretched to the limit. Algorithms and news cycles amplified outrage, spreading suspicion faster than any explanation could catch up. Every new update, every slow count in a key city became fuel for anxiety. It was a strange paradox. The system was working as designed, and yet millions were starting to feel it might not be enough. By the time November arrived, the country wasn't just preparing to vote. It was bracing for impact. Early warnings of foreign interference circulated, but this time the threat felt internal. Americans were questioning Americans, and in that quiet, almost imperceptible moment, the stage was set. The machinery of democracy was about to be tested in ways no one anticipated, and the weirdest, most unsettling election in U.S. history was about to unfold. Election night didn't deliver clarity. It delivered suspense. Early returns showed one candidate leading in key battleground states, and commentators cautiously framed it as momentum. Supporters celebrated. Critics warned it was too soon. Then the numbers stalled. Urban counties reported slower counts due to mail-in ballots. Overnight, as more ballots were processed, margins tightened, and in some states, they reversed entirely. To seasoned election officials, this was predictable. To the public, it was bewildering, almost surreal. The uncertainty sparked a digital storm. Hashtags like #StopTheCount began trending before many Americans had even gone to sleep. Lawsuits appeared in multiple states. Campaign lawyers were suddenly as visible as the candidates themselves. Press conferences popped up outside courthouses, community centers, even landscaping businesses. Affidavits circulated online before judges had a chance to review them. Cable news stretched late into the night, dissecting every statistical anomaly, every delayed update. And through it all, one unsettling question lingered. If half the country believes the system is fair and the other half believes it's broken, what happens next? By morning, the tension hadn't eased. It had multiplied. The Constitution outlines procedures. Courts exist to settle disputes. Certification deadlines are clear. Yet millions of Americans were no longer debating policy. They were debating reality itself. What started as a legal and procedural process had become personal. And in that personal tension, the quiet, almost invisible fracture of trust grew stronger. The strangest election in U.S. history wasn't just happening. It was quietly redefining what millions of Americans thought they knew about their democracy. By the first week after the vote, it was clear the drama wasn't ending. It was intensifying. Courts dismissed most lawsuits for lack of evidence, and state officials certified results, Yet millions of Americans remained unconvinced. On paper, the system was functioning. In perception, it was cracking. Online communities hardened their narratives. Every dismissal wasn't closure. It was proof, to some, of a deeper conspiracy. Suddenly, the legitimacy of the election itself was up for debate. The world was watching too. American allies expressed concern. Adversaries amplified doubts. Headlines from abroad questioned the stability of U.S. democracy, and diplomats braced for fallout. Meanwhile, in the U.S., election workers faced harassment. Polling officials who had spent decades serving quietly now became targets of anger and mistrust. The personal stakes for those running the system had never been higher, and the political system was straining under scrutiny it had never faced before. Through it all, the tension was tangible. Institutions held, but confidence didn't. The transition period, normally dull and procedural, became a stage for protests, heated rhetoric, and threats. The system was operating as designed, but Americans weren't just watching a legal process. They were watching themselves question reality. And with every passing day, the stakes climbed higher. The machinery of democracy had survived the first test, but the pressure was far from over. January arrived with a weight few had anticipated. The Constitution sets a clear date for counting electoral votes in Congress. Usually ceremonial, almost boring. This time it wasn't. Objections were organized in advance. Rallies were scheduled in Washington. Speeches promised to fight at every step. For weeks, rhetoric built like a storm, repeating claims that some Americans began to take as truth without evidence. The procedural chain of democracy was about to meet its most visible stress test. When the day came, what unfolded shocked the world. Security lines broke. Chambers emptied. Lawmakers scrambled to safety as crowds swarmed spaces meant to be orderly and secure. The certification of electoral votes, typically a quiet affair, paused mid-process. For a brief, surreal window, it seemed as if the very framework of American democracy could be physically interrupted. And yet, later that night, the process resumed. Votes were cast, and results affirmed. On paper, everything was intact. In perception, the country had shifted. The strangest part? The machinery held, but the atmosphere changed forever. The tension, the disbelief, the sense that rules could bend under pressure. Millions of Americans felt it firsthand. The legal system, the Constitution, and election procedures survived the chaos, but the invisible backbone of trust had been shaken. And with that fracture, the story wasn't over. It had only reached a point where every following decision, every public statement, and every law could carry the weight of an unsettled democracy. The question now loomed larger than ever. What comes next, when belief itself has been tested? In the months that followed, the ripples of that strange election reached every corner of American life. Security at government buildings tightened, congressional committees launched investigations, and state legislatures revisited voting laws, some expanding access, others restricting it. But the quieter battles carried weight too. Election workers resigned in record numbers. Polling places reviewed procedures with unprecedented caution, and the public's trust revealed cracks that wouldn't easily mend. The machinery of democracy had survived, but the human fabric around it felt strained. The paradox was striking. On one hand, deadlines were met, certifications finalized, and the inauguration proceeded without further legal disruption. On the other, belief in the process itself had fractured for millions. Democracy isn't just ballots and procedures. It's shared confidence in the outcomes. When that confidence wavers, even a perfectly functioning system feels unstable. And here, the strangest election exposed a truth most Americans had never confronted, that systems survive only as long as people trust them to. Meanwhile, the cultural and social effects quietly unfolded. Political conversations shifted from persuasion to suspicion. Terms like audit, fraud, and integrity echoed louder than they had before. Communities debated not just candidates, but the legitimacy of participation itself. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, millions still showed up to vote, still engaged, still believing that their actions mattered. That quiet resilience, often overlooked, revealed something essential. Democracy doesn't fail when systems break. It fails when trust disappears. Looking back, historians may debate numbers, rulings, and footnotes. But the real story isn't in the legal minutiae. It's in the cultural shockwaves that stretched across the nation. The The strangest election in U.S. history didn't break the system. It revealed how much the system depends on something far more fragile: belief. When millions of Americans questioned what they saw, the rules and procedures held, but the collective trust wavered, showing that democracy is as much a shared understanding as it is a legal framework. The lessons linger in quiet ways. Political debates now carry an undertone of skepticism. Election nights are watched not just for results, but for reassurance. Communities, families, and workplaces all felt the tension of a system under pressure. Yet, in that tension, there's also resilience. Millions continued to participate, to vote, and to engage with a system that had tested them in unprecedented ways. The machinery held, but the human element, faith in the process, confidence in one another, remains the true measure of democracy. And maybe that's the most important takeaway. The strangest moments don't always define a nation's failure. They define its endurance. The rules survived, the votes were counted, and yet the story continues, living in the way Americans now watch, question, and protect their democracy. If this story made you think differently about how fragile yet resilient trust can be, leave a comment, share your perspective, and subscribe for more deep dives into the systems shaping our world. Because sometimes, the moments that shake us the most are the ones that reveal who we really are. The strangest election in U.S. history didn't break the system. It exposed how fragile democracy really is, how much it depends not just on rules, but on trust. The machinery held, the votes were counted, but millions of Americans questioned what they saw, and that questioning revealed the true weight of participation. Even now, the echoes remain. Political conversations carry a subtle tension. Election nights are watched with anxiety as much as anticipation. Yet, through all the doubt, millions still engage, still vote, still believe their voices matter. That quiet resilience is the real story. The part that proves democracy isn't just a system of laws, it's a system of people. Sometimes, the moments that shake a nation the most don't show weakness. They reveal endurance. The rules survived, the process held, and a lesson lingers. Democracy lives as long as people do, questioning, participating, and believing in something bigger than themselves.